fascination of football, 50 years of the Bundesliga. We talk to Reinhard Rauball, the president of the German Football League.
Reinhard Rauball, former German coach Sepp Herberger once said that people go to football matches because they don't know what the result will be. Football is by far the most popular sport here in Germany. Why?
There's a lot of truth in what Sepp Herberger says. Plus, the rules are simple. People understand them. People can argue over if a player was offside, if he touched the ball, and if it was really a goal or not. Anyone and everyone can talk about those kinds of topics. I think that's one reason why football is so popular.
You're president of both the German Football League, which manages the Bundesliga, and president of German champions Borussia Dortmund. We're sitting here in the Borussia boardroom. Is there a conflict of interest?
There would be a conflict of interest if the president of Borussia Dortmund had day-to-day duties. But here at Borussia, the president is like the chair of the supervisory board at a company. It's an arrangement that is specific to Dortmund. It means I don't have any involvement in the running of the club, and that I can carry out my job as league president completely impartially.
This year marks the 50th anniversary of the German Football Association's founding of the Bundesliga, a professional competition. As a sports administrator, how do you view that decision to set up the Bundesliga?
I admire the men who took that decision. It can't have been an easy decision to make. At the time, established fiefdoms still played a big role in German football. Those men dared to make the leap that Spain and England had already made, which was a break with convention. And that's always difficult in Germany. Later on, the wisdom of their decision became clear. It was a smart decision and a boon for football. The Bundesliga has been a success story, both on the field and in terms of football's social significance in Germany.
Aber auch was die gesellschaftliche Bedeutung des professionellen Fußballs in Deutschland anbelangt.
So why was the decision to reintroduce professional football controversial at the start of the 60s?
Naja, umstritten in dem Sinne, dass
it was controversial because a lot of people always think that if it isn't broke, don't fix it. That's an expression you hear a lot in Germany. No one really knew what would happen. Could you justify clubs paying their players fixed salaries every month? At the time, TV rights deals and merchandising sales didn't feed into revenues. Ticketing sales were the only revenue stream they had. Could you expect players and their families to embrace professionalism or semi-professionalism, including a capped monthly salary? I think they were paid 1,200 marks back then. The league founders were responsible for resolving those sorts of issues. They took the decision and then dug their heels in after that. You can only be thankful for what they achieved.
You were a teenager then. Can you recall your first Bundesliga match?
Yes, I can remember what happened there because everything happened not far from where I used to play football. I still remember my first Bundesliga match. It was a week after I moved to Dortmund, when my parents and I moved to Dortmund. There was red dirt on the stadium floor, and, if you were little, you had to climb onto a crate of beer or up a tree to get a better view of the field. I also remember that there were big crowds at Borussia matches, even back then.
What are the biggest differences between Bundesliga fixtures back then and matches today?
You can barely compare the two. Let's start by looking at spectator turnout. At the start of the 60s, there were typically around 30,000 spectators at Borussia Dortmund matches. Last year, there were over 80,000 spectators at every game the team played. That's for starters. Issue 2, media scrutiny of professional football. Media scrutiny of professional stars has now reached a point where they can't withdraw from the limelight without that absence being noted. And it would be ludicrous to even compare the salaries then to those of today. Transfer payments certainly didn't exist in their current form. The only thing that's at all comparable is the game itself. Naturally, the way the game is organised is different today. We have different structures. But there were still great games of soccer being played back then.
Since 2000, the German Football League has managed the first and second divisions. Before that, it was the German Football Association. What can the Football League do that the Football Association can't?
It can concentrate on running just the first two divisions, the professional leagues, the first and second Bundesliga. From League 3 downwards, and especially at the amateur level, the German Football Association is responsible. The Football League is responsible for driving professionalisation, and I think it's important to specialise and to take into account the nuances of professionalism. That's not to say that the German Football Association couldn't do it. It proved for years that it could. But we're talking about an operation that brought in 1.66 billion euros last year, with 750 million euros in taxes and fees. It's always best to administer that separately through the Football League.
In sporting terms, how does the Bundesliga compare with the rest of Europe?
We've got to the stage now where we've replaced Italy in the UEFA rankings, which gets us a third definite place in the Champions League and a fourth possible place depending on qualification. We're really well represented in the Europa League too. That helps us consolidate our ranking. Financially, we're the second strongest league in Europe. On the field, we're ranked third. That's something to be proud of. But it would be a step backwards to rest on our laurels and not try to push for the second spot. And that's what we're trying to do.
And how will you go about that?
We're doing it by going down a different route to that of simply focusing on money, because in that regard it's quite clear what opportunities there are and where there's room for improvement. For about 10 years we've had youth training centres in place, which are compulsory for the clubs. And that's led to many young players enriching the Bundesliga, sometimes even dominating it. The clubs pay on average 90 million euros per year to maintain and advance the youth training centres. The young players really entertain people, and they're definitely one reason why we've broken 6 successive attendance records. At the moment, we have an average of 44,000 spectators per game. That's tremendous. It's wonderful. And it's one of the pillars of the Bundesliga, in the form of ticket sales. And in addition to that, of course, we have TV revenue as a second pillar. And the third pillar is the sponsors.
There are also more foreigners in the Bundesliga than, say, 20 years ago. How do you explain that?
Well, I see the issue of foreign players in the Bundesliga on different levels. Any star who wants to come to Germany or wants to further their career in Germany is welcome. But I don't believe we should judge the Bundesliga's calibre based on it having attracted a certain number of stars. That was the case in the past sometimes, and it didn't always work out. At the end of the day, if you look at whether it was financially viable and whether fans really wanted stars who headed off 2 or 3 years later, chasing new challenges, it didn't add up. Local ties are an important factor for spectators when they choose their club.
Season number 50 is almost upon us. What treats await fans in this anniversary season?
Hopefully it will be another thrilling season. Over the last few years, since the start of the millennium, we have had 5 different champions. So the Bundesliga remains exciting, and we want to deliver another exciting season this year. The surprises that fans and spectators can look forward to is something we will reveal in good time. But we want to keep them under wraps for now.
Almost everyone is expecting it to come down to Dortmund and Bayern this season. As Dortmund president, you have your favorite. But who will come in third?
There are surprises every year, and every year a team doesn't end up performing as expected. And that's true at the top of the table too. Last year, Mönchengladbach were the up-and-comers. They played really great football. But I don't want to predict which place which club will finish in.
Looking to the distant future, what would the Bundesliga be like on its 100th anniversary?
I hope that football continues to have a public following like it does today, that it doesn't end up purely a TV sport. I hope it continues to be a sport that people love to go to see, that families and women also go to see. By the way, today almost 1 in 4 spectators at Bundesliga matches are women. We've also introduced family seating areas in Bundesliga stadiums. Those are all steps in the right direction. And I hope that they continue. I hope we don't see revolutionary shifts, like enlarging the goal or changes to the rules, which have remained the same for over a century. Those things ought to outlast the present and continue to shape the game for the next 50 years.
Thanks for talking to me.
A pleasure.